Super team. This word has been thrown about left and right ever since LeBron James left for the Heat, and even back in 2008 when Boston assembled its title team. People use the word to describe teams that they think are really good, but there's not any real meaning to it or thought put into the definition. To show you exactly what I mean, let's run an experiment. Everyone, right now, leave down in the comment section your definition of a super team. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay, now everyone who did put their definition down in the comment section will likely have a different answer from the next guy. Why? Because there's no tangible, definite, palpable definition to this word. So let's see if we can fix that. Welcome to What's in a Name. Now, before we can get answers, we have to ask questions. And when ambiguous terms such as super team come along, there are a ton of questions to ask. For example, what does super team mean? Who can you consider a super team in today's NBA? Now, we know that the Warriors are a super team for sure, but what about the Cavs? As long as they still have Kyrie, of course. Then we got the Timberwolves. Are they one? Then we have the Rockets, the Spurs, the Thunder, even the Celtics. Could you consider these guys super teams? And why does it have to be a big three? Why can't it be a dynamic duo? I mean, if two players are good enough, can they just be considered a super team by themselves? Like, for example, what if LeBron and Kobe played together? Magic and Bird? Michael Jordan and Karl Malone? What if those guys played together? In fact, speaking of historic duos, what about the super teams of the past? Would you consider the Showtime Lakers to be one? The 96 Bulls? The 85 Celtics? The early 70s Lakers? Bill Russell's Celtics? Are these guys all super teams? Then what about the Rockets in the late 90s? They had like 3 or 4 Hall of Famers. Are they a super team? Then what about the 2014 Nets? They had Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Darren Williams, and Jason Richardson. Then we got the 2004 Lakers. They had 2 Hall of Famers along with 2 more, but they were out of their prime. So is that a super team? You see, there are just a lot of questions to be asked here, and there's no definitive answer to answer all of these questions. But there are some definitions that try to do that. Now, the first definition is that a super team consists of 3 players all close to their prime that are in the Hall of Fame or going to make the Hall of Fame. You know, players like LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, Magic, James Worthy, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale, Jerry West, Will Chamberlain, and Elgin Baylor, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett, and of course, MJ, Scottie, and Rodman. And also, using this definition will mean that the Rockets and the Nets and the Lakers, the teams that I mentioned before, aren't super teams because they were out of their primes at the time they were together, which makes sense. But what exactly does close to prime mean? If they're still operating efficiently, does it really matter how old they are? Or do they still have to produce at their Hall of Fame prime level? For example, when the 1998 Bulls won the championship, Jordan was 34 years old with Dennis Rodman being 38. So is that still a super team? Or do they have to be averaging like MJ averaging his 35 points, you know, Rodman averaging like his 20 rebounds a game? Or is it okay with the where they were at? Also, what about borderline Hall of Famers? You know, like Maurice Cheeks or Kevin Johnson, who were there but not there. I mean, what if Klay Thompson or Draymond Green don't make the Hall of Fame? Of course that's not likely, but what if? Then is the 73-9 Warriors team not a super team? And would that mean that even the Warriors now with Kevin Durant aren't a super team as well? That doesn't make too much sense. Then of course there's the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. They didn't have that third guy, neither did the 80s Sixers. It was only Dr. J and Moses Malone, no one else really. Sometimes even if a super team is in the league, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best. Case in point, the 2004 Pistons and the 2011 Mavericks, who both had 0 and 1 superstars respectively. If Chauncey Billups makes the Hall of Fame, and the 2 Wallaces do as well, then is that a super team? What about Jason Kidd? He was still pretty decent in 2011. He's going to be a Hall of Famer for sure. And they also had the Matrix, Shawn Marion. He might make the Hall of Fame. What about them? Definition number 2 is that you need at least 2 superstars and 1 star. However, if this is true, does that mean that the 73-9 Warriors are a super team? I mean, they won the most games in NBA history without 2 superstars. And you're not gonna call that a super team? And then again, on the flip side, there's the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. They were one of the most dominant teams in NBA history, but they had 2 superstars and not 1 star. However, this would classify the 80s Sixers as a super team, as they had Dr. J, Moses Malone, and Maurice Cheeks, who was a 4-time All-Star and 5-time All-NBA defender. Whereas with the first definition, they would not be a super team. Even with that one positive note, it's still quite ambiguous. I mean, what exactly dictates a superstar? What dictates a star? Is a superstar a top 10 player? top 15? Is a star an all-star? You know what, let's just lowball the definition of superstar, assume that it's a top 15 player. When the Spurs won the 2007 finals, Tim Duncan was easily a top 5 player, and Tony Parker was arguably top 15, but Manu Ginobili wasn't an all-star. So is that team a super team? Okay, third definition. At least one player is brought in through free agency or trade. All members of the core must have made an all-star appearance or an all-NBA selection in the 3 years before they joined the team. All members are roughly in their prime, which is 24 to 32. Out of all of the definitions that are mentioned in this video, this is, at least in my opinion, the most accurate. It doesn't necessarily define whether or not the players will make the Hall of Fame or not, and the prime definition is pretty generous, even though it can be a little bit ambiguous. But there's still a problem with the parity of the conferences. For example, the Boston Celtics could be considered a super team, with Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford all being all-stars in the past 3 years. But what if Al Horford played in the West before joining the Celtics? There's no way he would have even been an all-star snub if he played in the West. So, if that were true, would that make the Boston Celtics not a super team, even though they have the same level of talent? And of course, then there's the question of whether or not the Shaq and Kobe Lakers are a super team. In their greatest season together, when they went 15-1 in the playoffs, their third best player was Derek Fisher, who was never an all-star in his entire career, and let alone an all-NBA selection. But the Lakers had 2 MVP candidates that year, so does that balance it out? If so, then what about the LeBron James Heat? They had 2 MVP candidates plus a bona fide all-star. So if the Shaq and Kobe Lakers are a super team, then what does that make the Heat? A super team? And if that's true, then what about the 2017 Warriors? What would they be? Now, with these definitions, there are both pros and cons. Where one definition might classify a team as a super team, the other definition may completely disagree. This is perfectly fine and all, since they're from different points of view, with different perspectives. However, when wanting to find a definite answer to an ambiguous question, sometimes using quantitative measures just won't cut it, especially when using qualitative words within the definition. For example, take the 2 superstars and 1 star definition. Seems straightforward, right? But then you look closer. Then you think, wait a second, what exactly is a superstar? You may think that Gordon Hayward is a superstar, but the dude who came up with the definition may not think so. So you may think that the Celtics are a super team, but the dude who made the definition doesn't think so at all. So instead of that, maybe you could use something completely qualitative. For example, I read that a super team was a team that completely changes the landscape of the NBA. Now, this definition doesn't give any numbers or quantities, but it is pretty accurate. According to this, the Warriors are one such team, along with the LeBron James Heat and the 2008 Celtics. But because it only includes qualitative words, there is still room to argue. For example, what exactly is the landscape of the NBA? What do you have to do exactly to change it? Some people might say that's winning back-to-back titles. Some people say that you would need to win a three-peat. Some people would say that you need to win 6 titles in 8 years to change the landscape of the NBA. Which gets me to my final point. No matter what definition you use, whether it uses only numbers or only opinions, there will be people that don't agree with you. No matter how precise your answer is, there's always someone out there who's going to think something else, which honestly is the beauty of sports arguments. It's okay if people don't agree on what a super team actually is. That's what makes it interesting. My only problem is when people talk about super teams but they don't have any idea what they're saying at all. And that's why this video is here. I just gave you guys some guidelines to follow by for a super team, and it's up to you whether you want to follow it or not. Hey, you can even think that those definitions weren't even close to the mark, which is perfectly okay. Everyone can have a different opinion. In fact, that makes it even better. When you have a different opinion from someone else, that causes arguments. And when you cause arguments, both parties tend to learn at least one thing new, which is honestly really cool. So yeah, it's sort of a sellout answer. There's no actual answer. You believe what the answer is, but it's the truth. There's no real answer. You can believe what you want to believe. I'm just here to give you some guidelines. So if you like the guidelines, if you liked what I did with this, do the obvious thing. And with that, I'm out. See ya.